My name's Jan McLaughlin. I'm Director General here at PDSA. My role is really about managing the day-to-day operations across the whole of PDSA and driving the strategy forward for the whole of the organisation together with a board of directors. The value that PDSA volunteers bring to the organisation is measured in much the same way as we look at all of our operations in terms of the cost and benefit. And the way in which we value our PDSA volunteers is that in terms of paying for employed staff to be able to do all the tasks that our volunteers do, it would cost PDSA, based on last year's volunteering hours, over £10.3 million. And really without those volunteering hours, we really couldn't deliver all the things that we do in PDSA. And we look at it also from what does it cost to invest in those volunteers. And for every £1 that we invest in taking on our volunteers, PDSA gets £22 back. So very much incredibly valuable to PDSA. PDSA believes that volunteers play an equal part as our paid members of staff and play a key part in the teams in which they operate. So we make sure, in the same way that we do for any member of staff, that volunteers are suitably trained, supported, and form part of our whole management, strategic management of whichever site they happen to be working in. And the way in which we then make sure that that's sort of ingrained from the first moment they come to PDSA is that we make sure we've got dedicated resources to help manage that, to help manage the recruitment and to make sure that it's an enriched experience when volunteers come to PDSA. But also then at a very local level, that the managers that are responsible for them, as they are for all their staff at their site, are equally supported and have the right resources to be able to make sure that those volunteers stay with the organisation, having invested that time up front with them. Volunteers in PDSA are managed very much at a local level, be it with our hospital managers, our retail store managers. So everybody at every level who works with volunteers is involved in managing them in very much the same way as they manage their staff and their teams of people within those parts of the organisation. On top of that, what is important is that you invest in recruiting volunteers and getting the right people to volunteer for you and make sure that the work that we're asking them to do is suitable to them. And in that way, we have a volunteering office, which is headed up by a head of volunteering, looking very much at strategically how we want to use volunteers across the organisation. And alongside her, we have a volunteer development manager who looks at all the new initiatives and ways in which we can progress volunteering in PDSA, and then that's supported by 5 staff in the volunteering centre and other volunteers who also help. But I think it is important to recognise that everybody who works with volunteers has a role in managing them and supporting them. I believe that any organisation truly wanting to invest in volunteers has to make sure that that volunteering management is there and is supported right at the heart of the organisation, from the top down as well, to truly believe in that. And through our Director of Human and Corporate Resources, we have a head of volunteering that operates at a strategic level, as do all of our heads of senior managers within the organisation. And that makes sure that any strategic objectives or change in strategic direction is always thought of when we're thinking of our volunteers. And we make sure at every level then in the organisation that through our appraisal process, through setting our strategic goals and objectives, that we make sure that volunteers are an integral part of that business strategic planning process. And I can only endorse that any organisation in any sector thinking of seriously recruiting and retaining volunteers puts that dedicated resource into the heart of the organisation. The return is immeasurable. It's not just about the financial return. It's the experience that you gain from bringing those skills in and letting them support you in your strategic goals.